Amen. Amen. Let us prepare ourselves. Let us prepare ourselves to go a little deeper. We've gone higher with the praise. Now we got to go deeper into the word. And so just allow for yourself not to be distracted. If you have those my father calls them those cellular devices, we ask that you would take them out and take notes with those. If you have an iPad, take those out and take notes with those as well. But we're going to have some notes passed out to you as far as the notes and the lesson for today. We are still in our series of Genesis today, to where we are going to be delving a little bit deeper and attaching ourselves to what we did last week. And so last week we talked about Joseph. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about Joseph and what that looks like and what that means. And so we're going to deal with Joseph just to bring you up to speed. We know that Joseph is part of the lineage of Abraham. Okay? Yes, sir. And so it's Abraham, it's Isaac, it's Jacob, and then it's Joseph. And so Joseph is Jacob's son. And what we see here is that Jacob had a lot of children. You know the story of the incestual relationship that he had with Leah and Rachel. And he had children from those relationships. And so he had a lot of boys. And Jacob was somebody who got beside himself at one time, and he went and took his brother's birthright. But he didn't take his brother's birthright without some confirmation and assistance from his own mother. And so this is a generation, and like I told you last week, I don't believe in generational curses, but I do believe in generational conditions. Because there are certain things that can get passed down through generation. Most of you, and I ain't talking about nobody's family, I'm just going to deal with my own. Most of you understand that alcoholism can be passed down through generations. Drug abuse can be passed down through generations. Playerism can be passed down through generations. Some of y'all don't understand what I mean. If you always had somebody in your life that you call uncle, and that wasn't your mama's real brother, that means that that was mama's boyfriend. And so therefore, some of us know uncle in a different term. Some of us don't understand that everybody you call uncle ain't related to you. It's just that that's a new thing for your mother. So some of y'all will catch that afterwards. If you got any questions, catch me in the foyer. I'll help you out with that. Because at some point you got to understand that there are some things that you cannot change or go away from or run away from without the Lord being in that thing. Yeah. And so we see here in Genesis 39, and it should be on the screen behind me, Genesis 39, 19 to 23, if you don't mind standing for the reading and reverence of God's word. Amen. Genesis 39, verse 19, starts us on this journey to where we see Joseph has been pawned off into slavery by his brothers. And so his brothers didn't like the fact that he had his father's favor. And sometimes favor ain't fair, and sometimes you will have it to where, and sometimes some of the stuff that you get doesn't mean that you wanted it. It's just that you were blessed with it. Now, some of y'all will catch that around Tuesday on the 405 freeway. Doesn't mean that you had to have done anything to get it. It's just that you had it. Now, what are you going to do with it? And so here we see in verse 19, it says, when his master heard the story of his wife told him, the story his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, verse number 21 is the key verse, the Lord was with him. Every time you're incarcerated don't mean you're incarcerated by yourself. He showed him kindness and granted him favor, there's that word, in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. Look at this. He was made responsible for all that was done there. Sometimes you can't run from leadership. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord, there it is again, was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. The title of today's message is Acceptable Adversity. Acceptable Adversity. Come on. Acceptable adversity. What we see here is that Joseph has been sold off into slavery. And when he got sold off into slavery, we see that Joseph was sold off into a situation to wherein he became a slave. But because of Joseph's favor, if you don't get anything else out of the message today, sometimes people see you for who you are before you can understand what it is that you're all about. I'll say that again. Sometimes people see you for who you are before you're able to understand what you're all about. If you've ever worked on a class project, have you worked on it to wherein you didn't want to come in and kind of take over? You knew you could lead, you knew that you understood the project, you knew that you could get it done, but you were trying to play the background. But yet and still, when it comes time to decide on who's going to chair this particular group of students, isn't it funny how the students choose you and they don't choose themselves, and you have been sitting there quiet the whole time? Because sometimes you have to understand that leadership is not what you say, leadership is what you wear. Some of us are trying to lead, and that's not who we are. Therefore, you got to understand that as a leader, you don't have to always cry out and say, let me lead, let me lead. Sometimes leadership is going to usher itself right at your feet. I was reading a story last week, and I'm always trying to figure out, because I'm at the age now to where I'm not as young as I used to be, and I'm not as old as I shall get. So I'm in that in-between stage, Lisa. You understand what I'm saying? I'm in that in-between stage. You know what I'm saying? I make 47 look good, but I got to get to some place before I get to 50. And so I'm always trying to figure out, why is it that God has us in precarious situations? Sometimes I just want life to be easy. I want to wake up and the sun is hanging at the right level. I want it to not be too hot at the same time too cold. I want my children to all be Rhodes Scholars. You know, I want my wife to be that person that gets up and she can be, what's the woman's name? Miss Cleaver. At the same time, she can be like the woman on Scandal, a fixer. You know what I'm saying? That's you know, cook some breakfast and then go out and save the world. You know what I'm saying? I want her to be Storm and I want to be Black Panther. You understand what I'm saying? So where we just wake up like this. Isn't that what the meme was a few years ago? I woke up like this. I just want to wake up Black Pantherish. I don't want no troubles. I don't want no struggles. I don't want no trials. I don't want the hiccups. I don't want the stuff coming at me that I don't know about. I don't want to be in those situations. But I was reading a story last week. And sometimes I read stories because there's a lot of meat and substance in stories. And so I was reading this story about in order for God to bring out the best in his children, he brings about scenarios in our lives to build strength and character. When building our physical bodies, development takes on the form of pumping weights and running on a treadmill and participating in activities that require tennis shoes. And so workouts involve some sweats and so and heavy breathing and perspiration because something is being developed. God allows trials and adversity to put us in gymnasium situations. Just like the Father did with his son Jesus, he creates a workout scenario that includes a difficulty that we must work through. A lady came to work out at the gym. Everything about what she had on said she was going for a killer workout. She wore the typical attire, the headband around her head, wristbands around her wrists, and a water bottle on her side. She stepped into a clear area and bent down to touch her toes in order to stretch. This woman looked very serious about working out. She grabbed some dumbbells, walked over to the bench and sat down. lifting the weights. She did a couple of bicep curls, put the weights down, wiped herself off with a towel, and in an exasperated voice, she said, "Woof, that's enough for today." She was on her workout. This lady looked the part, but she had not truly come to the gym for a workout. Isn't it funny that many Christians come to church every Sunday looking like they're ready for a workout? We wear the right clothes, sing the right songs, talk the right talk, but building real strength requires real effort and a little sweat. God figures that we will not voluntarily go to a spiritual gym, so he brings the gym to us. Adverse circumstances, cross-bearing situations, difficult scenarios, and problematic encounters all serve as opportunity for Christian growth. We got to understand that adversity is not something that we can run away from. Sometimes I get tired of the bills. Sometimes I get tired of the rent. I get tired of trying to figure this thing out. I get tired of trying to pump up people that when I need pumping up, they ain't nowhere to be found. I'm tired of trying to encourage folks that don't want to be encouraged. They just want me to fix it for them. I get tired of always trying to step into situations, and then I'm the one who gets beat up and talked about and cussed out because I'm trying to help you fix your life. But then when your life gets fixed, I can't seem to find you at the party when I need somebody to have some pity on me. Now, some of y'all going to catch this later on. See, everybody wants a friend when they are in a situation to where they need some answers. But everybody ain't friendly when you need your life to be worked out and your situation to be corrected. They can't find the way to come and help you. There's some folks in your life that if it wasn't for adversity, you wouldn't know what their name were. If it wasn't for adversity, they wouldn't text you sometimes. If it wasn't for adversity, they wouldn't be over at your doorstep knocking on your door saying, "Child, I just want to sit and talk to you for a minute." Some of us, once we get past adversity, all of a sudden we forget. See, adversity is something that you're supposed to remember. It's like working out. Your body remembers the workout regimen because you have practiced it and you put it into motion. But some of us want to get out of the adverse situation before we are strong enough to carry on. Come on now. Our study in Genesis now shifts to Joseph. That's Jacob's favorite son. He was the firstborn of Rachel, the woman he had fallen in love with when he first came to Haran seeking a wife. Joseph had two separate dreams that didn't require much insight to understand. The first dream was that his shift or his wheat stood upright while those of the brothers bowed down. The second dream was that the sun and the moon and 11 stars all bowed down to him. Both dreams meant that Joseph would rise above his brothers, but the second dream meant that he would rise even above his father Jacob as well. It would be fair to say that the rest of the family didn't interpret Joseph's dream with the same excitement that Joseph did. In fact, they were jealous and angry with Joseph. That's why sometimes you got to be careful who you share your dreams with. Because sometimes the pressure won't come from outside. Sometimes the pressure comes from within. We're trying to lock out the enemy. Sometimes the enemy is sitting at our table. Okay, we put bars on the house to try to protect ourselves from the element when the element is walking up in your house every day. Got keys to your door, got access to your refrigerator, slides their shoes up underneath your bed. Sometimes the enemy is who you're sleeping with, not who you're trying to keep out. At one point, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his older brothers who were tending flock a good distance away. And at first, they thought they would kill him, but the oldest brother, Reuben, insisted they don't harm the boy. Throw him into a cistern, let him die on his own. Reuben was intending to come back secretly and rescue him. But while Reuben was away, the rest saw some Ishmaelites, traders, some Midianites, and decided to sell Joseph as a slave. They sold him for 20 pieces of silver. Some folks don't know your value. That's why you got to know your worth. The traders brought him to Egypt, where he was again sold as a slave. In Egypt, he was purchased by Potiphar, an officer for Pharaoh, but the hand of the Lord was on Joseph. Soon he oversaw Pontiphus' estate and became overseer of all he owned. Again, tragedy struck. However, when he was falsely accused by Pontiphus' wife, that's where we pick up our story. See, Joseph was a good-looking brother. He had that LeBron James mystique, but he had that Morris Chestnut look. Joseph was a good-looking brother. And sometimes people will throw themselves at you to get you off course. We see the wife, Pontiphus' wife, was trying to get Joseph to sleep with her. Every bus that comes your way don't mean you got to get on. Come on, preacher. See, some of us are riding buses that was never meant for us to ride and ain't going in the direction that we ain't even going in, but we got on it because we thought it was the last bus. Sometimes you need to not worry about if it's the last bus. Just get on the bus you're supposed to get on. Therefore, some of us are on buses going in directions that we don't want to go in, and therefore that's why we are getting further away from God's blessing. Now, Joseph could have easily. Because Joseph was all man, just like me. He was all man. He could have easily slept with Potiphar's wife, but he knew he had a calling on his life. Some of us got to understand that there's a difference between a calling and an assignment. An assignment you carry out because of the requirements of said assignment, which means that you might not necessarily enjoy it, but you got to do it to get to your next point. When it's a calling means that God is calling you to higher standards. Therefore, when you have a calling on your life, there are certain things you cannot do because of the call. Amen. Amen. Some of us got assignments that we have yet to complete, and we can't understand why God ain't calling us. Well, if God can't trust you with a little bit of stuff, what do you think He's going to do with you with the big stuff, which is your calling? Some of us got to get through the assignments of our life. Some of us haven't graduated from where we're supposed to graduate from. That's why we're stuck at the gate. What you got to understand is that God had a calling on Joseph's life. Therefore, God having a calling on Joseph's life meant that Joseph couldn't do things the rest how other folks did. So where Joseph couldn't do what the other men could do, Joseph had to live to a higher standard because he knew what he had seen in his dreams. The question on the floor is, what has God showed you? What dreams have God shown you? And why is it that you can't understand that the dream is just as big as the promise? But you got to decipher the dream to get to the promise and understand that the calling is attached to the promise. So therefore, everything that God has called you to do, you can't live like the other folks live. Now, we'll forget, man, when I was a kid, Jay, I used to always tell my mother all the time, man, that my other friends could do whatever they wanted to do. It was the craziest thing. They could go to parties, they could hang out, they could go to different areas of the city. And I told y'all I was hood adjacent. I wasn't really in the hood, but I dabbled in the hood. I'm hood adjacent, you know what I'm saying? Because I kind of wanted to be hoodish, but at the same time, I knew my zip code. So therefore, I used to dabble in hood tendencies. And I didn't understand that my mother was trying to keep me on the straight and narrow. Therefore, when I would always say to her, well, so-and-so is doing it, the proverbial response was, I'm not so-and-so's mother. That's right. Just be my luck that everybody's kid go to the party. And when the shooting starts, the bullets miss everybody else's kid and hit mine. Amen. I said, well, Mom, I'm all right. She said, you think you all right. I'm trying to keep you out of certain situations. Sometimes God tries to keep us out of certain situations. Because he knows that the bullets of life are going to come, but we steadily want to go and dabble in hoodish tendencies, not realizing that you're royalty. Therefore, when you're royalty, you can't deal with trashy situations. Sometimes God is trying to keep you from certain things that you want to dabble in, not understanding that as you dabble, it becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, it becomes a condition. And when it becomes a condition, it can become an addiction. And therefore, God is trying to save you from yourself. God is trying to save you from yourself. Joseph knew he couldn't sleep with that woman. Yet still, when he denied her, she trumped up false charges on Joseph. That's why you have to be careful. Everybody that cry out that something happened, sometimes it ain't happened. It's just because nothing did happen. Therefore, they're going to accuse you that it did. Joseph, one of the great men of the Bible, because he faced terrible and unjust circumstances and yet demonstrated the character of a powerful man of integrity. In this society, integrity has taken a walk and ain't come back yet. There is no integrity. There are no standards. There is no structure. Everybody just wants to do what they want to do and live their truth and say what they want to say. And if it comes from the highest in the land all the way down to the lowest, that means we can do whatever we want to do. We can lie about saying what we said and say that we didn't say it and deny that we said it and say the other person is stupid for even saying that we said it. I'm going to let y'all figure that out. Person in the highest land, the leader of the free world. Can say what he wants to say and live how he wants to live. But then you want to question why the world is turning upside down. When there are no standards, where there are no integrity, where there are no structure, then that means that at some point the world is going to start eating up itself. It's like a disease. Once cancer started, it don't stop until it has eroded whatever it is that it has attached itself to. There are many lessons from Joseph's life. Each one of us has walked through difficult circumstances and there are more trials ahead. But I just want to stop by and give you 3 points. 3 points and then we're going to get out of here. 3 points. The first point. God is present even when we seem alone. Somebody needs to understand that.
That's the word.
God is present even when it seems like we're alone. When Joseph got sold into slavery, you got to realize he was disconnected from his family. He didn't know anybody, yet still he knew what he had seen. Some of us got to understand that even when we're in a point to where we don't feel like there's anybody that is there, God is always present. I'm going to give you a term that I want you to write it down and I want you to study. God is omnipresent. God's omnipresent refers to his presence in all times and all places, simultaneously. That means he can be across town with Lisa, but at the same time, he knows what Jay is doing. And if he knows what Jay is doing, he knows what Daryl is doing. If he knows what Daryl is doing, he knows what Charles is doing. At some point, you got to understand that God is all places at all times. Therefore, you don't have to try to run and hide from me. Because I can't be where you are at all times. I'm trying to keep up with myself, and I'm trying to keep up with the folks that God has given me to be stewards over. So you don't have to worry about hiding from the pastor, but how are you going to hide it from God? Sometimes we try to shuck and jive the preacher, but you don't understand that it ain't the preacher that you got to shuck and jive, because where you were last night, God was right there. Who you was with, God was right there. Who you was with, God was right there. When you were texting what you were texting, God was right there. When you were looking at what you were looking at, God was right there. God is omnipresent, God is omniscient, and God is omnipotent, which means God is just the bomb. That's all I'm going to say. He's the bomb. He's the bomb.com. You understand what I'm saying? And in the words of my daughter, like the period. Period. Because God exists apart from and outside of the time and space, he's not limited by their constraints. God's omnipresence is a deterrent for sin and a source for great comfort and hope for believers. You got to realize God has always been there. When you were crying because your daddy rejected you, he was there. When mama couldn't love you the way that you wanted her to love you, God was right there. When you were being violated, God was right there. When you spoke evil over somebody's life, God was right there. God is present even when we seem alone. And there will come times in your life to where you don't feel like there's anybody there. And you are walking around trying to figure out how you're going to fix this thing. You don't understand that you're not even walking by yourself, that God is carrying you. Therefore, you got to understand, he's never left you alone. Amen. Somebody needs to understand, God ain't never left you alone. God is working on your behalf. Many people do a running commentary on their lives trying to figure out what God is doing and why. But some things are impossible to understand until the end. Sometimes you don't need to understand why. I know I got some intellectuals in the audience, and sometimes we always trying to figure it out. We trying to figure out through M equals MC squared. We trying to do mathematical equations. We're trying to go to the book. We're trying to look at commentaries. At some point, you got to understand that there are some things that you will never understand why you went through in life until you get to the eternal. You ain't got to understand why. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and say, why, Lord? Why you got me in this situation? Why you got me in between a rock and a hard place? God has you in certain situations so that you can listen. Sometimes He need to cut the lights off in your life and disconnect your cell phone so that you don't have nobody to talk to but Him. Other day I was driving down the street and the radio kept having bad static issues. And, it unnerves me. Sometimes as I've gotten older, I don't like erratic noises. I don't like noises. I hate noises. And I couldn't understand why the radio wasn't playing. Lisa and I got all upset and I got irritated and I cut the radio off and I'm just driving down the street. Do you realize that I had the best conversation with God when the radio was off and it was no distraction? It wasn't no Stephen A on the radio. It wasn't no Steve Harvey. It wasn't none of them other Steves on the radio. It was just me and God. We were talking and having a conversation. Do you realize that the problem that I thought that I had, by the time I got to work, I felt a whole lot better, and I walked into work, I actually had a skip. Now, I ain't skipped since I was 12 years old, but I had a skip in my step because of the simple fact that I had a conversation with God. Some of us only go to God when we want to talk, but then when we're supposed to talk, we shut up. You got to realize that this is a conversation. This is a relationship. You're supposed to talk to God every day. We talk to those people who can't add no value to our life, but the one who gave us life can't get a conversation. Come on, preacher. Understand that there are some things that you're going through that you just got to go through it. But here's the cool part. Here's the part I want you to jot down over on your side notes. Do you realize that what you're going through, if somebody else was going through it, they would have already killed themselves because your problems are your problems. Therefore, God designed your problems for you because He knows that you have the backbone and the shoulders to carry this thing. So therefore, don't want somebody else's blessings if you can't handle your problems. Because just like God designed your problems, He has a blessing that's designed especially for you. But you got to go through your problems before you get to your promise. And if you can't go through your problems and get to your promise, then you can't get to your potential and get to your rightful position where God wants you to be.
Go ahead. That's right.
You ain't never going to understand it. We tend to focus on the wrong in our lives and get comfortable with the isolation. Stop focusing on the wrong. Yeah, we can look at the fact that we ain't got enough money. Who does? If we ain't a part of the 1%, ain't nobody in here got enough money. Now, if we can put our money together, we can do some damage, but you got to understand, are you going to focus on the lack of money, or are you going to focus on the stuff that you get that don't require finances?
All right.
Okay, some of y'all don't understand. So, y'all know the kids been having a prom, right? And this last prom, it just kind of hit at the wrong time. But you know I had to do whatever I had to do for Boo-Boo, because Boo-Boo is special to me. That's my baby girl. I got to stop. I'll go to Wall Street and tell the folks, look at here, loan me some of that money that y'all trading on this floor right here, and I get it back to you somehow, some way, but it's because it's for Boo-Boo. So I found myself, and some of y'all are very good at your budgeting. I found myself, Mother Willis, I had $20 to my name. 20. You could go to McDonald's and spend $17.45, and all you got is a Big Mac, fries, and a drink. Didn't even ask for no sauce. I don't need no sauce. You're going to charge me for the sauce, right? Because they charge you for bags now. When you go to the little, you want a bag, well, that's 10 cents. 10 cents for the bag? So lady, get her put bags in the car. She said, don't you buy nail one. You understand? Nail one. Some of y'all don't understand what nail means. Nail one more bag. You got bags in your car. $20. that was supposed to last me for a week and a half. Then I looked at my calendar and I had these meetings and I'm saying, Lord Jesus, what we gonna do? Some of these meetings were lunch meetings. Some of these meetings were at restaurants. I said, okay, Lord, we're gonna ride on faith.
Yes, sir.
Every meeting that I went to over the last week and a half, I didn't have to pay for lunch.
Amen.
Because see, I was doing God's business. And when you do God's business, sometimes the tangible stuff we want to see will come in an intangible way because you're doing the Lord's work. And see, when you're doing the Lord's work, the Lord will provide. Now, he didn't give me what I wanted in my bank account, but he didn't let me go hungry throughout the week with these meetings with different folks. So you understand what I'm saying? Sometimes you just got to ride on faith.
Stay right there.
Sat down with a gentleman, he said, Cedric, order what you want. In my head, I'm saying, brother. You don't know what's in my pocket. Oh, what were you thinking about getting? Bread? Lady came, what you want to drink? Water. Do we charge for the lemon? Could I get the lemon, please? She said, no, we don't charge for lemon. Okay, give me some lemon. Thank you very much. She said, no, sir, you get what you want. It's on me today. I said, look at God. Next meeting I went to, said, what you going to have? I'm like, we're going to do salad today. Did you want that to be a chicken salad? No, just bring me a head of lettuce and I'll make it happen. You want dressing? We're going to take this water that I put that lemon in, just douse it on the lettuce, give it some flavor. Y'all don't understand, $20. He said, go ahead and order what you want. I got you today. Sometimes you got to understand, God is present when we don't think that he is. And God has already worked some things out that we're trying to worry about. Stop worrying about it. Take a step forward and understand that God has already peeked into your future, seen what it is that you need, and he's provided. But some of us are so fearful that we cannot see it. See, everything is about tangible. We want to be able to touch stuff. When you're dealing in the supernatural, when you're dealing in God's realm, God does not operate in seeing all the time. Sometimes God just does, and sometimes you have to be faithful enough to realize that he's already worked that thing out while you're trying to figure it out. So therefore, take a step and go forward and understand that if you're doing God's business is going to take care of you. Amen. Point number two, God is kind even when our situation is difficult. Though Joseph was treated unjustly and his circumstances declined, his hope in God did not waver. Joseph knew that the situation he was facing was not good, but God always is. Adversity and injustice were a constant refrain in Joseph's life for many years in Egypt. But so was God's presence and kindness. And so whether in Potiphar's house or in prison, he can continue to serve God. You see from the scriptures that we use this afternoon. You notice that the simple fact that Joseph went to prison and then Joseph was the head person in the prison. Sometimes leadership don't mean you got to be in the biggest chair. Sometimes you got to lead where you are. Sometimes leadership don't mean that you got to get paid the big bucks. Just lead where you are. That's why when people ask me, do you have management skills? Yes, I do. I managed to raise 5 children with 5 different personalities, and some of them have multiple personalities, but we're not going to talk about that today. That's all right, Jamaica. Some of them have multiple personalities, so I'm learning how to manage. They say, what's your biggest staff that you manage? Oh, about 10 to 12. Do the math. Each person has an extra personality, so I've managed 10 to 12 people. You got to understand something. Sometimes in serving God, it ain't going to be the prettiest. It's not going to be the sexiest. It's not going to be the best. Sometimes you got to serve God by rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty. I know a lady that's over, and me and Jay have been there. The church has been there before. Jennifer Chow over on Skid Row. She's on 6th and Glass. Has a church service every Sunday in a rented space. Cold part is she don't have a building. She rents a transmission shop's parking lot.
Yes, you do. In the name of Jesus.
She has a line of people coming to her service every single Sunday. And all she does is feeds them and gives them the word. Those people are being transformed through her ministry. But yet still we want to stay up at night trying to figure out how big our building can be. We worried about income and finances and budgets. We worried about stuff that at the end of the day, God has already worked out, because if God blesses you, you don't need the budget. Sometimes you just need God, and he'll suffice and patch up what you need. Never a Sunday that woman has service has those people ever gone hungry. The last time I talked to Jennifer, I called her and I said, Jennifer, we're going to bring some food over. And she started crying on the phone. She said, Pastor Cedric, she said, you my angel. She said, because we didn't have enough to feed the folks today, and I didn't know what we were going to do. She said, and I just started praying, and you called. Sometimes you got to understand that even in your difficult situation, you can be the answer to somebody's prayer. Walk with that for a minute. Some of us get so caught up in our own difficult situations that we don't understand. You can be the answer to somebody else's prayer. Sometimes you take the focus off of your difficulty and start ministering to some other people. Your difficulty don't seem that bad. Your problems all of a sudden begin to shrink because now you shifted the focus. Amen. Those things that are only big are those things that you focus on. But if you shift your focus and begin to focus on other people and other problems and their difficult situations, all of a sudden your difficult situation seems to subside. And at the end of the day, you lay down and you try to figure out, now, what was it that I was stressing about earlier in the day? God is kind in our situations, even when our situations are difficult. He's still kind. You can be broke, but that don't mean you destitute. I don't know how many people have driven to work and drove back on fumes. Y'all don't understand about the fumes driving. Thank you, Jesus. Sometimes you just try to break to get that needle to stop flowing. You understand what I'm saying? Break real hard so that needle can just... Y'all see, some of y'all are good. Some of y'all are good. Some of y'all are good. See, at least they don't understand about how you go slow. You don't get in the carpool lane when that needle is close to that red spot. You don't get in the carpool lane. I want to sit and stop as much as I can because I want to stop this thing, this needle from moving. Come on now. I told y'all about having breakfast for dinner. Some of y'all don't understand what pancakes are the best at 8:30 at night. And please don't find a piece of ham back up in that refrigerator, Brother James. You slice that up, put that on that skillet, and sometimes it can be Spam. Pretend that it's ham. Some of y'all been good all your little lives. Y'all don't know what it is to eat top ramen for lunch and dinner. You save the packet so you don't run out of seasoning for them noodles. Don't use all that packet. I'm saving that packet. Charles understand. He's from Tuskegee. HBCU students understand about them top ramen. Come on now. Save the packet, man. You got some more of that packet. You got that seasoning. You got some more. I used to take the packet. Come on, Sister Young. I used to take the packet and I get a paper clip. Stop laughing. Stop laughing, Jermaine. Just take the paper clip and fold it down. Put that paper clip right on top of there. That way that season don't fall out. You need that season for the next noodles that you're about to get. God's kind even in our situation that is difficult. You can go through your health issues. God is still kind to you. Come on now. You can be sick as a dog and God is still kind to you. He can walk out and leave you. God is still kind to you. She can break your heart. God is still kind to you. You might get on the bus, but God is still kind to you because even though you may not have a car, he still gives you transportation. It's all about how you look at it. It's all about perspective. Joseph found himself in jail, but he knew that he was not incarcerated. Therefore, he was still going to use his gifts of leadership wherever he was. So the second question on the floor is, where are you leading? Where are you leading? Some of us want the title, but we don't want to do the work. Oh, I just want to be a wife. Why? It's a lot in that. You talk to Lady Karen, she'll tell you it's a lot that goes with that. Talk to my mother, 50 years, talk to her about it. I just want to be married. You sure about that? You sure? Talk to Sister Lewis, you sure about that? Because they'll tell you some stuff that ain't on the job description. They'll tell you how to read between the lines. It looked pretty on that job description. All we need you to do is show up on time. But what about when you ain't got no more time and they still want you to show up? Are you sure? Third thing. God is at work even when we can't see. One of the most difficult things we can do in difficult times is to stay refreshed and strengthened in the Lord. But you got to understand something. God will change you through the fire. Sometimes if you don't have fire, you don't have refreshing. You understand that fire is what changes something from one state into another. Some of us are walking around half done trying to figure out why we can't get nothing done. Half done meat will cause issues when it gets in your system. Jesus don't want half done people. It's the scriptures say, and you can test me on this. God said you got to be hot or cold, but he don't want you lukewarm. He'll spit you out. But sometimes you got to realize what you're going through is, but you are going through the fire so that you can be changed. Because God needs to change you so that he can get you where you need to be so that he can use you for the calling he has on your life. He can't call you if you're not changed. He can't give you responsibility if you still act like a child. If we're strengthened in the Lord through difficulties, then God can use those things in our lives to change us. Me and Karen were talking the other day. Our oldest daughter was over, and we told this story before. When Karen and I were going through our marital situations, we had people minister to us and say that God was going to use this as our ability to counsel people. And we laughed at them. We said, we ain't counseling nobody. We ain't going to be together. How you counseling when you ain't together with the person? What kind of counseling is that? As soon as we came out of that storm, as soon as we came out of that rain, we started getting phone calls from people asking us to counsel them. Sometimes what you're going through, God is going to use that so that you understand that you're going to use that to help somebody else. You can't help somebody else if you've never experienced anything. I'm going to give this to you for free. You can't teach what you don't know. And you can't lead where you haven't gone. Too many people in the church are trying to lead folks. They ain't never been nowhere. If all you've ever been is on your street, how you going to tell somebody what's going on the other street? At some point, you got to realize that you are going through that situation because at some point, you're going to have to share that situation with somebody else to help them better themselves. And I know that God sent you through that thing, and I know you got burned on the way through, but you got to understand, you got burned, but you did not die. Therefore, if you did not die, that means that God was protecting you. Let us not forget the 3 Hebrew boys. When that king looked inside of there, he knew he put 3 in there, but all of a sudden, he saw 4 in there. And when they came out, they didn't smell like smoke. But the folks who were putting them in there, he said, turn up 7 times hotter. His own men got burned, but God's folks didn't get burned. So therefore, sometimes you got to go through the fire and understand that the fire is your experience to share with somebody else about how I danced on the water and I didn't get wet, and I went through the fire and I didn't get burned. So let me tell you how to get out of your situation. God is going to use you to be the proprietor of somebody else's deliverance. James wrote that we should consider it all joy when we endure trials, not being happy that we're suffering, but anticipating that God can do something in all things and that he will transform us. I'm going to leave you with this. God's providence. God's providence. God's providence is always at work. Providence refers to God's continuing work and involvement in his creation. Christians believe in God's personal and direct intervention in the world as opposed to a hands-off approach to creation that affects not only the natural order, but also the individuals and in the events within human history. That means that there's nothing that happened in your life that wasn't supposed to happen, so stop saying you regret anything. You shouldn't regret anything. I had that baby at 16. Okay. I'm a single mother. Okay. I can't seem to find nobody that wants to love me. Okay. My mother went off and left me when I was a baby. Okay. My daddy said he was going to the store to get some milk and he still ain't come back. Okay. Those are your situations, and you got to understand that everything that has happened in your life, God has had some form of orchestration in it.
Amen.
Job didn't suffer because Job was bad. Job suffered because God knew he was the best. Sometimes you got to accept your adversity and understand that adversity is what you are good at, because it's not you that's doing it, it's God that's working through you.
Right.
And just like your situation is adverse, somebody else got a worse adverse situation than that. Because everybody that got money don't mean they happy. Everybody that's rich don't mean that they are wonderful. Sometimes you have to understand that God has you in this situation for a reason. And if you don't get anything else this week, understand that the adverse situation that is coming, and yes, it's coming. Some of you are sitting there saying, well, I'm good today. That's great. Tomorrow is coming. For all my Game of Thrones fans, winter is coming. And see, when winter comes, it gets dark. When winter comes, it gets cold. When winter comes, you don't know who is your friend or your foe. But you always know, as they taught us in the old church, you got a friend in Jesus. Yeah. As the praise team sang, I got a friend. I'm a friend of God. He calls me friend. Accept your adverse situation. You may have a job today, but you may not have one tomorrow. Your kids are good today, but they may not be good tomorrow. You may not have lost a loved one today, but tomorrow's coming. As we stand to our feet, I want to give you this. When I wake up in the morning now, I go and I sit with open hands to the Lord. I used to pray, and I used to tell God what I wanted him to do for me today. But as I've matured, and I've understood that he, for some reason, what I tell him to do, he don't never do it. I say, Lord, whatever it is that you would have for me to do, whoever it is that you would have me to see, whatever it is that you would have for me to say, and wherever you would have for me to go, allow for you to lead me today. Amen. And whatever you give me, I'm going to accept it. Frankie Beverly and May said that joy comes with pain. We got to accept the good and the adverse. The adverse teaches us how to appreciate the good. My prayer for you this week is that as you go through your adverse situation, don't get upset. Don't curse God. Because the adverse situation that got you to this point, he didn't complain. Jesus was in an adverse situation, hanging in between two thieves. One that didn't believe who he was, and the other one knew who he was. In an adverse situation, he hung there from the 6th to the 9th hour until he gave up the ghost. And he went and was put in a borrowed tomb. Adverse situation. He stayed there all day Friday and all day Saturday night, and early Sunday morning, he changed that adverse situation into what? A blessing for you. He went into an adverse situation so that you could be blessed today. Amen. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you right now for all that you've done, everything that you have allowed us to see and hear today. Heavenly Father, allow us to walk into this week accepting an adverse situation. Whatever you're going to give us, allow us to take the adverse, the good, the bad, the ugly, the sometimes testing and the trials, along with the joy, the love, and the patience and the kindness that is going to be rendered to us this week. Allow us to be like Joseph. Whatever situation we find ourselves in, allow for the favor of God to rest upon us, and that we might lead wherever we are. In Jesus' name we pray. Let us all say amen. Amen.